Okay, I'm going to borrow Gulbeden's method of like, I think we just need, where we are, just stand up so we can just, we're getting there. We're going to end so soon. So the festival. So shake it like you mean. Right, stretch yourselves. Okay, we're going to do the YM. No, cancel. Okay. We're now going to have two brilliant people who knows a lot about archiving as a method, as a practice. I would like to welcome to the stage Jonelle Twum from Black Archives Sweden. Together with Kaitlene Koranteng from iniva, who's going to talk about archiving as a method and their process. And I happen to have intel that they met a few years ago, so I can't wait to hear what they have been cooking up, what they've been inspired by each other's work. A diva takes time. Hey. How are you feeling?
I'm good. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Yay. House.
Totally perfect. Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Hi everyone, and hi Kaitlene. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's really nice to be here, and yeah, nice to see you. And yeah, as Samuel mentioned, we met a few years ago when you came to London, and it's really amazing to see how the archives have grown from your vision to what it is now. Yeah.
Thank you. And it's always nice. iniva has been one of the institutions that have inspired our work. So it's always nice to follow up and keep following your work. Yeah. So it's an honor to be in conversation with you. We have just 20 minutes, and we'll try not to speed through things and a lot of big questions to speak about.
Yeah.
But we'll try our best and kind of touch base on these questions. We've been invited here by Grafikens Hus, Anna Jönsson, to be in dialogue with each other in the framework of this conference. And in the context of collection as a site of gathering, of artistic processes, of dialogue and exchange. And been given some generous and generative questions to speak about. I was thinking maybe if you can just briefly tell us about iniva, particularly your role and work there before we start off with the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sapake gave us a bit of an introduction to iniva, but yeah, iniva started in the 90s, was conceived of slightly beforehand. To say the full acronym of the name, so Institute of International Visual Arts, which is a bit of a mouthful, very 90s, but but really was a legacy of the British Black Arts movement. So really a time, if you're unfamiliar with the period of the 80s and late 90s, up until the early 2000s, where there was a real activity of artists of African and Asian descent in Britain from the diaspora, making work, attending art school, and really as a phenomenon that the UK wasn't familiar with, was maybe a bit unprepared for as well. Didn't have necessarily the room or the care to hold that energy. And also the 80s in the UK was a real time of political energy, of organizing, of uprisings. And so it's this wonderful combination of creative energy and activism and politics really led to the beginning of iniva and what we are today. And so we've been going for 31 years, going on 32 years now, actually. and still continuing with the work of trying to be a space to hold the energy of visual artists from those diasporas, from Africa, from Asia, the Caribbean and Latin America. And we're really thankful to be able to hold an archive of that work, of the exhibitions we've done over the last few years, of the programming, of ephemera related to artists from all over the world, and really be a space for research, be a space for iteration and creativity and new ideas. We also have the amazing Stuart Hall Library, so Peke also touched on that, which is a specialist art library. Over 10,000 publications, probably more since we last counted, forever growing, and yeah, trying to be a specialist space. People often describe it as a bit of a home. That's something we want to nurture, that people feel safe coming here, that where they often feel excluded from other spaces that hold information about the art, that say the arts has to look and be a particular way. And yeah, really that's what we're trying to do, is to continue to support artists, continue to be a space that can support their work. And yeah, to be a home where people could come and feel comfortable and relaxed and not have their guard up about, oh my gosh, I'm operating in a space that is inherently violent towards me. I think a lot of people probably think of Black Archive Sweden as a space they can feel safe, as a home.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, what has it been like for you setting up a space like Black Archive Sweden? Yeah, and what can you see it growing into?
Yeah, it's been quite interesting, and a very a beautiful and challenging process to think of an archive in a Swedish context, and also an archive that we've dreamed of having it materialize physically. One of the first things that very well-meaning archivists within big institutions told us, it's great you're starting digitally, never go physical, because that is the worst thing that you can do, which I get is very well-meaning, because archives eat space, and all archives, the one complaint they have is that they don't have enough space. So it's very well-meaning, and physical spaces cost a lot of money and generates new work. But there's something, at the same time, being aware of that and the intention behind that, it was incredibly important to work towards some sense of physicality, because there's so very limited spaces in Sweden where we can have a space that is connected to Black identity. There's very few of that. That is not just pop-ups, temporary events, which we need and has been nourishing us, but it was incredibly important to work towards that. So it's been very beautiful, but also very challenging, because it's a lot of resource-demanding work that does not always reflect the funding opportunities that exist there. I remember one of my colleagues saying in a meeting with funders that it would be really nice to have some money just to slow down and think. And one of the funders was like, what do you mean? That will give you money to do nothing, just to think? And I think that's also a need a lot of artists need. You just need to step back and reflect. And it was such a confronting thing for a funder to hear, because a lot of funding is also within the context of producing projects. Which also, for smaller organization, and in Sweden we call it in the free culture sector.
Okay.
I
kind of like that.
Often we get ourselves in these endless projects as a way of surviving, which has its own implications.
I mean, I think we probably definitely share that sentiment. We're always trying to think of ways of slowing down. I don't know if we're always successful. We're probably not. But I think it's also our own fault a little bit, because we're like, also we want to do the work and we're very ambitious. But I think you do get to the point where it's like, oh, this is also not good for the organization or the project or the space you want to create if you're constantly in a mode of production.
Absolutely, and I think there is, which is also contradictory. Often I think about archive as slow work, because the material, especially if you don't want to generate dead materials, like it needs to be, you need to activate that, and that requires a level of care and attention that is very difficult when you're in a constant level of production for survival. But in terms of, if I can ask you, because we've been talking a bit about how we've gotten where we are in our respective, I don't want to call Black Archive an institution, in our respective contexts and works. But where do you see iniva going in the future?
I mean, I think we've been thinking a lot about actually what we want to be and what we want to do. And I've been at iniva for 4 years now, which has passed really, really quickly, and has felt quite condensed. And actually, to give that context, before I started at iniva, we had an archivist for, I think, previous to me for about 6 months, who did a survey of what we had in the archive. But that was a very short-term project, and before that, actually, there hadn't been very much work done to the archive. There was a vague idea of what was in there, but actually not a lot of people knew about it. They knew about our library space, which is a wonderful space and a wonderful resource, but not a lot of people knew about the archive or could access it, or unless they knew about a project and were interested in it, or about this artist we had worked with, and they could come and ask us that question. So actually, in the last few years, it's really transformed into an archive that is more accessible. We do have an online catalogue that people can actually search for stuff now, which is a real feat in itself. But where I see us going is actually getting rid of this idea of what it means to be a researcher. We're always going to have those specialists who come, the art historians, the artists who have a research-led practice, but we also want to be a space where anybody can come and learn about what it means to be an artist, to operate in spaces, to be creative, to know about the legacy of the Black British arts movement. Because as I'm assuming not a lot of people in this room know about it in terms of it being a Swedish context, but actually even in the UK, it's not household knowledge, which is terrible. It's that even as I think about it, it's shocking that such important work should be known, and everyone should know about it. And we're ambitious. I think that's something we're always going to be, but we've really been thinking about what is the mission of iniva, what is our next step, and actually that's what we want to do. We want everyone to know about Black British art. That should be non-negotiable, and we're really non-negotiable. And we're really lucky that for the next 4 years we do have some funding to really focus on our continuing that archival work, to catalogue the rest of our archive collections, especially iniva's history, other organisations that have done amazing work that people don't know about and should know about, and really hoping to reach more people that actually should know about the history of Black British arts in the UK. Yeah,
that's beautiful, and also I hope you get the funding that keep sustain this work, because your work is incredibly important, and more people should know about it as easy as they know the British Museum. They should redirect that energy towards iniva and the funding as well.
And can I also say I'm also incredibly inspired by the work you've done, because it's not easy, and I think especially like a DIY project of your own creation that is a passion project. It's not easy to do, and so I think I want to give you a round of applause. I want to give you your flowers.
Thank you for that. And just listening to you guys having that many years of doing this work and thinking about the future. Because I was thinking about this question a lot, and feeling a bit contagious in terms of the the future in terms of something that is progressive and having the archives grow and being an important resource, but at the same time struggling with that linear idea of progress, and which also comes with the archive expanding, and which is very tied to an idea of an archive. The archive is meant to exist ideally forever. If you ask the state archive, they'll tell you one of their principles in their work is that the archive is to be here forever. And it's something that I've been feeling so, have a restriction with, even wanting to promise or being in that that mind of thinking of, and trying to think around what would it mean if time or our relationship to futurity in terms of archive, especially smaller archives, as is cyclical, is non-linear, is centered on community and community needs. What does it mean in 5 years if the community do not have use of Black Archive Sweden in the format that we exist? Is there space to readapt and shift? And what I'm kind of thinking when I think of future or time is, my hope is that we can, regardless of form and shape, and even if it dissolves, that we can, it could still, the idea of it or the side of the archive can be a space of care and responsiveness, regardless of how it. Yeah, so I've been struggling with thinking 10. Ideally, it would be great if it can exist, and but really thinking of how time can also be a resource for community and So that's where I am in terms of future thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been thinking a lot about fugitivity and refusal in the archive, and in general, actually. It's important to, I think, be a space that doesn't have to stick towards what you should be doing. And I think you don't have to do what you should be doing, I think, or what people tell you should be doing, or you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. I think especially in documentation of Black life, it hasn't existed in normative archive spaces, in the ways that it should be, in the ways that it deserves to be. And so I think it's also our responsibility to be like, actually, that doesn't work for us. You didn't work for us, and so we're not going to work for the rules that you give us. And I think and also like I've gone down a very traditional route in terms of being an archivist. Also like I think there's a statistic that came out a few years ago in terms of information professionals, so librarians, archivists, people who work with records in general in the UK. I think it was 97% of people in that sector in the UK are white British. And I think even if you take that 3% that is not white British in ethnicity, I think it's less than 1% who are Black. And as much as that sounds shocking to hear, it's not shocking when you look at the sector whatsoever. And it's not surprising. I think I went to the conference in the summer for Archives, the Archives and Records Association, and you could probably count the number of Black people in the room on both hands. And again, it's shocking to see, but it's also not shocking when you know the sector. And it's like, so I'm going to make up what works. I can use those rules, and I can also refuse teaching that doesn't work for me. I can work. I think sometimes it's important to know the rules so you know how to break them. And we spoke about you spoke about space and the physical space and the importance of that. I think that there's a powerful. It's powerful to be able to hold something and to feel it. And so I do agree with you there, and that actually it's important that there's a space that people can go to. I think one of the things that has been important for Iniva is space, but I maybe want to ask that question to you around how has space been important for Black Archive Sweden as a space of learning and as a space of meeting?
Yeah, no, it's very crucial to our work, and you kind of notice something when people gather in a space that is also the premises is for them. That it shifts something. There's this movement of energy in both the circulation of ideas, knowledge production, and whatnot. Something happens, and being affirmed in that way is incredibly important, and potentially could be healing for some people, and especially when these types of spaces so limited in the Swedish context, it becomes even more important to make claim of them, that we need this and the community needs it, and you see what happens when people are in there. So it's something, if possible, and it doesn't need to be from Black Archive Sweden, like more of these spaces, I think is so important to be seen, to see others that look like you, to share similar ideas, even to be in disagreement with people is incredibly important. Bodies in space do something shifts in between us that is incredibly important, that I think is difficult to achieve online. There's, and I also think we've been shifting towards this, which is very in line with this neoliberalization of how to relate, which is very individual within the self and looking for the self needs. But what happens when you're meeting people that are dissimilar to you in a space that you're meant to care for? It does something. Even after events, having people that have never been in the space helping move tables and chairs, people coming by themselves, sitting by themselves, and suddenly after a few weeks they've become friends with. So something is happening that I don't think is important to note and shouldn't be taken for granted. And like speaking about space, it makes me think about community and what that means for you guys. What is the community of iniva, and how does your work feedback? In what ways do your work feedback to community?
I mean, I would say our core community is the artists that come into our space to use it, to work with us. I think we're able to provide a resource that exists outside of an academic space, or like at least we're based on a university but independent, so that is that. But we're able to operate as a completely independent space that anyone can join, that has amazing resources. I think people really value that. I think often people have access to resources and then suddenly they're not allowed to go into that space anymore, and it's incredibly frustrating. And so actually we have a community of hungry minds who want to host and be in conversation with each other. I always love being on the floor of the Stewart Hall Library and talking and chatting with people and asking, what are you here to do today? And I'm always learning from the people who come in the space. I'm like, I had no idea what that was 10 minutes ago, but thank you for teaching me. So it's amazing community of creative people, teachers of arts and working in social practice in various ways. So that's been really lovely. Students who often feel excluded from traditional art school spaces, or who are in art school spaces and are struggling within it, cannot find the material they need, or if they can, it's in a context that they don't feel comfortable with completely. Or actually, we had a group of students in who this week actually specializing in arts and learning, so people have an interest in arts pedagogy and learning and teaching in various ways. And they were speaking about their own art school library and how it feels like such a hostile environment that they don't want to be in there. And I think often that it feels restrictive to be in that space, and so how nice it felt coming into our space. And so we do get all sorts of people, but I think what they have in common is that they can feel safe and comfortable there. Yeah.
That's beautiful, and that's incredibly significant, especially when talking about artists in art school, where you're often isolated or do not have a lot of artists that reflect the ideas that are important to you.
Yes.
So I'm happy that you guys exist. I'm conscious a bit about time, and I was thinking that maybe we could talk about the significance of collections and working within collections, and what could our understanding or uses of collections offer us in our current political context. We have Europe very much grounding itself in fascism. We have the effects of globally of empire, from Sudan to Palestine to Haiti to Iran. There's a lot of things going on. What could, if we go back to what Stuart Hall says about living archives, what could a collection offer us?
I think this is a question people have asked me before in various ways and iterations, but the thing I always think back to is a workshop that we did a few years ago. We were doing a series of workshops called Uncovering the Archive, and so it was really to introduce the idea of archiving to young people, having a creative practitioner in the space who was using material from our archive as a prompt and seeing how it married with their creative practice to lead those sessions. And something one of the participants said to me is that, when they found out about what archives are, because it felt like finding a friend in history. And that's something that's always, since we've had that workshop, that's always stuck with me. Is that it feels like finding a friend, and I think that's what archives and collections can do, is it provides a point of holding on, or having a hand to hold, or a point to hold, that sometimes this work has been done before. You're not the first person to do this. You can find guidance, you can find teachers, you can find friends, you can find learning and lessons that have been had before. And that's why archives exist, to show that, actually, to evidence that this has been done before. And so I think we can use it as tools for learning. We can use it as tools to find friends, to find resonances, to find spaces where you can listen and hear. And so I'm thinking of Tina Kamt as I'm speaking, and one of my favorite thinkers and writers, but she has this book, Listening to Images, where she's looking at collections of different photo studios and archives, and she speaks about actually being a rhythm to collections that you can hear, and it kind of just takes you to you just need to be a listener to hear what is being said, to see the patterns. And so I think that's something we can apply to all collections in various ways, maybe not necessarily always in the way that Tina was speaking about in the patterns of photographs, but I think there's something that's to be said about being as a listener to receive the lessons that history can tell you. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I couldn't speak to. I feel like we could keep going forever.
I know. Yeah, we have to wrap up. No, but just to what you were mentioning of what the archive already offers us is this repository of resources, and because often, at least for people that are not working within the archive, we think about collections being for future use, and move away from the idea that the archives is meant for us now. It is practical materials and users of today. that like these technologies and modes of violence have already been inscribed within the archives. We can go there and find that these are not new, the same as techniques and modes of resistance. And I think it's something that we often become disconnected and have to recreate processes and methods all the time. But it's a site for us to go there to breathe, to get breaks. But also the archival moments, if we think of collections beyond what is kept and documented somewhere else, happens in gathering. It is us doing this now, and that is equally powerful and meaningful in confronting or relating to the world as it is today, because God knows this is a lot most of the time, but the archives can be a space to breathe, and yeah.
I love that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this.
That's a lot. Thank you, darling. This was so lovely. Oh my God. I feel...
We need to get off the stage,
No,
right?
no, no.
Okay,
I can stand here. No, I feel terrible for cutting you short, but it was also beautiful reflection and ending. And we could have just sat here and listened to you. It was a beautiful conversation and a perfect ending for the conference. I think the archive, having the honor of following Black archives from the beginning and seeing it what it has become, and then seeing your meeting to be inspired. I think this is the space, like we are meeting to be inspired by each other. These 4 institutions are working in collaboration, and what that will give birth, we will find out soon, because this meeting happened a few years ago, and now we have a space that is documenting and witnessing our everyday life in Sweden, that we are so grateful for. And then you mentioned something like, it doesn't just have to be like Black Archives Sweden, it can be anything else. Like I'm thinking of Kurab in Göteborg, the queer archives, documenting queer art history. And it's these kind of spaces that we desire, we deserve, and we need. So thank you so much for that great reflections. Now get out of my stage!
Thank you.
Okay.